We're here with Steve Kirsch, and Sam Harris has revealed himself to be a guy with a narcissistic personality disorder, and he can't admit when he's wrong. And he's even for censorship of his political opponents, and he thinks that's cool because he's smarter and he's right. They're wrong, he's right, and so he's for censoring them. He said that about the Hunter Biden laptop story, and now he's been proven wrong about COVID, and now listen to what he says.
Take it back to COVID for a second. In one way, and we got very lucky that COVID wasn't worse than it was, right? It could have been much, much worse. It could have been 10 times as deadly or 50 times as deadly.
Yeah, it wasn't, though. It was just as deadly as it was, which is not very deadly. It wasn't very deadly. It's not very deadly. It has a low death rate.
We would have lived through, or many of us wouldn't have lived through something truly awful. But had COVID been worse, just enough worse to really get our attention, to really be undeniable, we would have had a different political conversation around it. There wouldn't have been the same kind of vaccine skepticism. Brett Weinstein would not have been releasing 80 straight podcasts on the dangers of the vaccine if a few variables were changed. I mean, if everything was totally different. So this is hard to.
No kidding.
If everything was totally different, Brett Weinstein would have been wrong. Turns out he was right. But if it would have been more different, he would have been wrong, and I would have been right. As it stands, I was wrong and he was right. But I'm giving you a scenario where that guy would have been wrong.
Yes, well, he is right about one thing. That if the virus were more lethal, Brett Weinstein wouldn't be doing 80 videos. He would be doing 800 videos.
Yeah.
About the same thing.
So here we go.
That's what would happen.
Now listen, he doesn't stop. Watch this.
Just
who is this guy?
Who is Sam Harris?
Sam Harris.
Do you you know who Sam Harris is, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Here we go.
COVID exactly as it is, but just make it preferentially dangerous children rather than to old people, right? You just flip that around, the variable of age. If kids were dying by the hundreds of thousands from COVID at a rate of whatever it was, 1%, say. But if it was pretty much all kids, we would have had a very different experience.
Yeah. Once again, if everything would have been totally different, things would have been different, and then you would have been right. But things aren't totally different. Things are as they are, and you're 100% wrong. Still, because reality still isn't different.
Right. And the patience, that there would have been no fucking patience for vaccine skepticism. Right. And
so he's saying, had things been way different, we wouldn't have put up with people who disagreed with me.
Yeah, it's like they put up with us, huh? Really?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what he's.
Yeah. Tell me about how they put up with us.
But that's what he's saying.
All the platforms I've been banned on.
Yeah, he's pretending that actually people did put up with us, and they didn't. Yeah, so here we go.
Everyone would have recognized that this is not my body, my choice. This is you're not going to kill my kids with your ignorance, right?
Wow.
Hey,
man.
He's still wrong. He's 1,000% wrong. Yeah. We know now that the vaccine doesn't stop transmission and contraction, and that everyone is likely to get COVID. And who said that? Joe Biden's vaccine czar said that in the summer of 21. And you know who else said that? Dr. Fauci said that. Everybody has already said that, except he doesn't know this, and he still wants to make other people wrong who were right, and he has to invent a made-up scenario to do it, and he's still wrong, because that is still wrong. You don't take the vaccine to save someone else. You take the vaccine to save yourself, because it doesn't stop. If you want to. It doesn't stop the spread, although I have to say it does slow the spread and this contraction. But it doesn't stop it, and that's why he's 100% wrong. And everyone's going to get Omicron anyway. So that's why that's a bullshit argument he's still making in 2023. That just shows you what a mental midget he really is.
Yeah, and the other troubling thing about this, well, I can sacrifice my life to save someone else's, is there's always, anytime you take a drug, there's a risk that you're going to die. Now, but when you do that calculation, you have to say, okay, so let me get this straight. So I'm going to take, we'll call it a 1 in 1,000 risk of killing myself to save someone I don't know. Now, I got a family. I've got a family that depends on me. So how do I make the decision as a human being to say, oh, I can have a 1 in 1,000 chance of saving, or say, let's say a 1 in 100 chance of saving someone else's life, and I have a 1 in 1,000 chance of killing myself and depriving my family of me. Do I want to sacrifice myself, my own life, to save 10 other people, right? I go, but I'm going to save 10 people. Now, that has to be an individual decision. I don't think it's right for a society to make that calculus for you, because let's say you're president of the United States, right? Well, if you're president of the United States and we get rid of you and you die, that can have profound implications on the world. And do we really want to make that risk assessment for the president of the United States versus, say, we have an Albert Einstein who exists? Do we really want to kill him off because he could save 10 people he doesn't know? How does society go and make that risk-benefit trade-off? And here's the more important thing, Jimmy, is where's the darn calculation? Why hasn't the government ever shown us the calculation for, yep, you're going to risk your life, but here's how many people you're going to save? Now, where, Jimmy, have they ever shown us that calculation to sell us on it? Because if I sacrifice my life, am I going to just, save one other person's life, in which case the net society gain is 0? Or am I going to save 10 people? Or am I going to save 100 people? Jimmy, how many people? Answer?
I don't know that answer.
No, and nobody knows that answer. You see, that's the problem. You're being told, like, oh,
yes,
you're gonna sacrifice your life for the better good, but we're not going to show you the calculation, Jimmy, because they don't have the calculation, because they can't do the calculation, because they don't have the numbers to do the calculation. So them mandating that you take the drug to save society is all bullshit, because there's no math behind it. There never was. It's like, the Wizard of Oz, you have to ask, can I see the guy behind the curtain? No, we can't show it to you, but just believe. It is so corrupt.
Okay, I think he has some more to say. Let's brace yourself, Steve. Brace yourself.
And you change one other variable. What if the vaccines actually really did block transmission much better than they in fact did? Right. And then there was a moment where it was only rational to expect them to block transmission. Turns out they don't do it nearly as much as we would hope.
Yeah, like zero.
They just shorten the window by which, during which transmission is possible.
Really?
If they're even doing that
now,
I don't know.
Date on that one.
But let's say the vaccines really did block transmission, but then nothing else was, all of the other mishigas about how, untested they are and how dangerous they yet might be, and the spike protein and blah, blah, blah. Leave all that in place. Just give me a little more transmission blockage and give me kids being preferentially killed or injured by this disease. The obscenity of much of what was said, much of what was said about COVID at the time at which it was said, the conspiracy thinking, the platforming of people who were obviously unwell and unbalanced professionally and mentally around vaccines.
You mean the people who turned out to be right? Yeah. The people, and then he has to invent all these.
That's what he's talking about.
And he has to invent all these 3 or 4 different scenarios where he would be right, he's still wrong, and then he has to say, what if the vaccine was even better? Then these fucking people, who were asking questions, who turned out to be right, then we could have really hated on them hard. Well, then he says you're mentally unwell, or whatever if there's a guy who's obviously mentally unwell, and I'm not kidding, it's Sam Harris. He's mentally unwell. I would, if he was hammered I would think he was more mentally well than him doing this. This is mental. This is listen to this. I'm gonna play it one more time. Listen.
Well, and unbalanced. People who were obviously unwell and unbalanced.
Now, is he talking about Dr. Robert Malone and Dr. McCullough, who've been proven right on COVID? Is that who else is he talking about? Is he talking about Joe Rogan, who was also proven right about COVID? Who's he talking about? Is he talking about Dr. Yoganda? Is he talking about Dr. Jay Bhattacharya? Is he talking about Dr. Kulov? All these guys have been proven correct. They're not obviously mentally unwell is this guy, which is why he can't even open his eyes as he's saying this shit.
Professionally and mentally around vaccines and their skepticism, the patience for that would have been non-existent, right? And so in some sense, we got unlucky at how benign this was and how mysterious it could get.
So now Mr. Mentally Fit is now lamenting the fact that the virus wasn't deadlier. Because if it was, we would have been able to shut these people up. But it wasn't deadlier, and so we were unlucky. That's what he just said. We were unlucky that the virus wasn't deadlier because we couldn't shut these people up then who were correct in their skepticism. And they proved him wrong. This is a guy with on steroids, narcissistic personality disorder. And you're seeing it right now. This is a borderline personality. That's what Sam Harris is.
So do I have the right Sam? I'm looking him up on Twitter.
He left Twitter. He left Twitter. He left Twitter over this.
I see. That's why I can't find it.
No, he left Twitter because he did a video where he said he was okay with censoring his political opponents around the Hunter Biden laptop because they were bad people and he's a good person and Trump was bad and Biden's good. And so that's why it was okay. And he literally said that stuff. And so he got pilloried nonstop since he said that, so much that he left Twitter. And now he's saying this. I think he's been on a bender since he quit Twitter, and his brain is broken. That is a mental case. Here's what I said. I said, if the vaccine actually worked the way they said it did, and if COVID-19 was way deadlier than it turned out to be, and if it wasn't benign to children but killed lots of kids instead, then we could have shut up people who disagree with me a lot easier. Brett Weinstein says this. He says, Sam Harris makes two bad assumptions. Our institutions actually function, and we all work from the same information set. Captured institutions deliver unreliable information, including outright lies. Sorting signal from noise is the skill that separates us. COVID is our wake-up call. So Brett would be right. He's the guy who's actually been correct this whole time. Turns out he's still correct. So here's a healthcare worker that follows me, and she says, it's a shame that I, a healthcare worker who took the COVID vaccine and other vaccine associated with working in medical, can't even ask about disturbing trends in my hospital without being called anti-vax. I lose followers. I get ugly direct messages. I deleted that post. I think I need a break from this. So she's a healthcare worker who has questions, and she can't. And that's got 31,000 views. And so here's what I often run into so this is what Brett, this is what Sam Harris was talking about. These people who want to shut up people that disagree with them. Here's another one. This guy, Josh Olson, who's an Academy Award nominated screenwriter and an acquaintance of mine who was turned into a COVIDian and a smearer and slanderer of people who question the status quo on COVID. Now, what makes this especially tragic for a guy like Josh Olson is that he saw through Russiagate. He was one of the people who stood shoulder to shoulder with me and saw right through Russiagate for the hoax that it was. And he spoke about it publicly, which I thanked him for. But now he's not. And now his brain got broken from COVID. And he does stuff like this. And he slanders me on Twitter. It's not good. And so what happened is Jamie Lee Curtis said this at the Oscars, or this is a Golden Globes. And she said this.
You know what? Life is short and precious, and we're in a profession that celebrates the arts at a time when we're out of COVID, we're back together, and if we're not celebrating this moment right now, what are we doing?
So that bothered him so much that he retweeted that video and said, reminder, we're not out of COVID, and it's still got potential to wreck your life. Wear a mask. Again, this guy hasn't read anything since 2019, and it's obvious. Stay safe. Ignore anyone who politicizes it, as he's politicizing it by telling you to not debate people, not engage them seriously, ask them why they think COVID's over, give them your opinion. He says just ignore them. And you know who says shit like that? People in a cult. That's called cult-like behavior. That's not what grown-ups do. That's not rational. That's not a normal, healthy interaction between people. Even if you think they're on your team, there are teams around a pandemic. So so that's what's wrong with this thinking. It's very tribal. It brings out the worst in people. And they end up sounding like Sam Harris. And even a guy like Sam Harris was supposed to be a brilliant guy. And this guy is an Academy Award nominated screenwriter. And they sound like they just got drunk. And then they took an anger pill. And then they went on Twitter. That's what this sounds
amazing. Right. Yeah. I mean, and on the team.
On our team. So,
Right.
she's not on our team, everybody. She's not on our team. Get rid of Jamie Lee Curtis. She's not on our team. What a mental case Josh Olson is.
Yeah, it's funny.
Fucking mental case. And people called him out for it. I love this. He says, Josh, eventually, not today or tomorrow, but eventually you will realize, like many of us, that we were lied to on a level that we were not able to comprehend when it was happening. One day you will regret shaming those of us asking questions. I don't think so. I don't think so. Yeah. These people will never feel shame over their bullshit COVID stuff.
Well, we'd like to think that they would.
So let me just give you a call. So this is for Josh Olson. This is from Carl Sagan, who's an actual scientist, not a YouTube jagoff like me. So maybe you listen to him. He says, if we've been bamboozled long enough, we tend to reject any evidence of the bamboozle like those people, like Sam Harris and Josh Olson are doing. Right. We're no longer interested in finding out the truth. The bamboozle has captured us. It's simply too painful to acknowledge, even to ourselves, that we've been taken. Once you've given a charlatan power over you, you almost never get it back. And that's what Josh Olson has done, and he's requiring us to do, and I ain't going to do it. And I'm done not pushing back against guys like that on Twitter anymore. That ended this week. I used to just ignore their bullshit and their smears and their cowardice, because that's what that is. That is fucking cowardice. And I used to ignore that. I'm not ignoring it anymore. So I went and humiliated him on Twitter. All I did was retweet people who were making fun of him. And he got ratioed on his own tweet, on his own thread. So even his own followers have had it up to here with that shit, and they're done with Josh Olson's fucking fear-mongering and cowardice.
That's so awesome.
That was awesome that his own followers ratioed him. That was awesome. Everybody were doing live stand-up comedy in Los Angeles in January and February in Los Angeles. And then we're going to Tempe, Palm Springs, Milwaukee, Minneapolis, Nashville. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for all those tickets and become a premium member while you're there.